Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, energy assistance and homeowner relief, but first, let's talk about Pennsylvania and money for roads and bridges and more, and we'll do that after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we have some very important subjects to talk about, and joining me to talk about some of them is Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Robert, as always, glad to have you here.
Great to be with you, Terry, as always.
All right, as you know, there's a big, when we got to the infrastructure bill, a little more than $1 trillion, there was a lot of resources in there, money, I'll put it bluntly,
right,
for roads, bridges, and a lot more. But before we get into the specifics of it and what it means for Pennsylvania, give us a brief overview of the condition of roads and bridges and why money, whether it's state money or federal money, really matters.
Certainly. Pennsylvania has the largest road network of any state-controlled road network in the country at 40,000 miles. We also have 70,000 miles of local road. That's a lot. Just the state system is larger than New York and New England combined. So we have a lot of roads. We have a lot of bridges in the state, 6,000 or 25,000 bridges in the state. We used to have 6,000 that were in bad shape.
Right.
We've eaten into that with some of the funding that we did here at the state level a number of years ago, so we're down to 3,000, but 3,000 is still a lot of bridges that have to be fixed.
Yeah.
So we have a large need. We always do. Our geology and geography and climate is a freeze-thaw climate. It wreaks havoc on concrete, so we're always repairing, and we're always kind of behind on those repairs.
Big, complicated state, right?
Absolutely. Old, cold, and wet, and that is not good for roads. So we're constantly in need of repairing them. We're also the Keystone State. We have a huge distribution industry now in Pennsylvania, so you can't drive along our interstates without seeing a 1 million square foot distribution center, one right after the other, particularly on 81 and 83. That's a new phenomenon, putting new stress on the road. So a lot of work that has to be done. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's now talk a little bit about the infrastructure bill, $1 trillion. It easily passed the Senate with, 19 Republicans voted for it. Goes back to the House because of the amendments that were put into it. So what is in that bill, which I think is going to pass the House in some form? It's going to pass. What is in that bill that matters to Pennsylvania?
Well, first of all, we have to keep in mind that there's a lot of big numbers that are being thrown around. 11 billion here, $1 trillion there, and that sort of thing. So let's kind of break it down to what is over and above what we have been receiving from Washington before. We are somewhat dependent on the National Highway Trust Fund, as we call it. About 40 to 45% of our funding for roads in Pennsylvania come from there. When we passed the major transportation funding bill here in Pennsylvania in 2013, we were always looking for Washington to kind of back and fill that last third. Well, it's taken this long. They're finally going to get to a piece of it, but let's talk about where we are. So we're spending about $2 billion a year in construction. That's down about 20% over the last several years. So we're actually not keeping pace or not even where we were with construction projects, mostly rehabilitation, almost no new construction, but all rehabbing the existing system. That's important to understand. This infrastructure bill in Washington will provide enough money for Pennsylvania to kind of get back to where it was when we passed Act 89. So
hold on. That is hard to believe given all the press coverage that this bill, the $1 trillion.
Well, it's important. I don't want to downplay the significance of it, but I don't want people to think that this just solves all the problems or all the funding issues for roads, bridges, and transit in Pennsylvania. So it will help. It will mean somewhere in the order of $500 to $600 million a year. That's across all things: design, acquisition, preliminary engineering, and construction. It'll help our bridge situation. We'll be able to eat into the bridge inventory even better. It will stabilize the program in order for us to move forward before we can kind of look at where we go in the future with funding.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about transportation options. That's also an important subject, and we'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, infrastructure and more, it's a very important topic for all Pennsylvanians. You drive, whether you drive, and probably even if you walk or ride a bike or you ride a motorcycle. But there's also something about the transportation options. What are they?
Okay, so Governor Wolf created a commission in the spring, about 50 members on the commission from all walks of life. I was proud to serve on that with the Secretary of Transportation, a number of legislators, and other very people much smarter than me on the transportation subject. And we looked at all of the issues, looked at the needs surrounding all facets of transportation, transit, highways, ports, multimodal, freight rail, and pedestrian facilities. That's all very, very important as it all fits together, and came back with revenue options into the future. Because we are reliant on the liquid fuels tax, which is a consumption-based tax, and every time you pick up the paper, you see another manufacturer that's committed to going to all electric. Well, all electric vehicles aren't consuming fuel, so we're going to have to find eventually a new source of funding roads. The commission is recommending a move, and again, it's important to understand that that's not tomorrow. It's sort of a long-term move to what they call a mileage-based fee. So you basically be charged on the number of miles that you drive. And that was the theory that we created with the transportation bill. We keep our registration fees low in Pennsylvania relative to other states, but our gas tax is high. So you get your entrance is inexpensive, but if you use more fuel, then you pay more if you use more miles, and that's what the mileage-based fee is. Now, back to electric vehicles. Right now, they're not paying any of that fuel tax, so there are proposals to increase the registration fees for those vehicles to offset that. We've supported that as an industry. That's part of the revenue options.
Well, let me interrupt you here for a minute. Sure. Electric vehicles. I read and hear the wave of the future. And are they coming?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the manufacturers are going in that direction more and more and more. Right now, it's a fairly small percentage of the traveling fleet, but you're looking at truck manufacturers, not just automobile manufacturers, but everybody seems to be wanting to go in that direction. So we're going to have to set up a user fee system in order for those. They're still using the roads.
Yeah, sure.
Electric powered trucks are still beating up the roads just like a gas.
So fewer gasoline stations and more recharging, is that recharging facilities for the electric?
Back to our first segment, there is money to pay for build out of that charging infrastructure that is included in the bill that Congress is looking at right now. So we are moving as a country towards an energy policy that gets away from consumption of fuel and goes towards consumption of electricity as a power. So that's part of it. The other thing is, I mentioned very briefly the distribution economy. One of the things that the commission recommended is really taking a look at perhaps a fee on deliveries and that sort of thing. You mentioned, whether you drive a car or not, you don't have to leave your house in order to be impacted by transportation, because everybody's getting Amazon and everything else delivered to their house. And
Yeah.
there's all this.
We get 5 packages a day.
Right. So that's creating stress on the system. That's creating costs to the system.
Yeah,
So,
good point.
So the commission has recommended that we take a look at some sort of user fee for those people taking advantage of the package deliveries right to their house. And I think it makes sense. Colorado's looking at it. They have a bill now, and we think that it makes sense for the future. So we're looking at mileage-based fee, delivery fee, that sort of thing. Kind of these are shifts from in our current revenue or taxation program, not necessarily layered on top of other things.
Yeah, we have about 45 seconds left. Let's go to the revenue from the tax, the revenue from the gasoline tax, typically had gone to the state police operations. I'm not going to get into whether we should defund the police or not. That's not an issue here. But that money has been moved over to roads and bridges. What's going to happen there?
Okay, so we're still moving about $700 million, or a little less than $675 million a year in this year's budget out of the highway fund, out of gas tax revenues, equivalent to about 11 cents a gallon of the gas tax, over to the general fund to pay for a good portion of the operations of the state police. We've advocated long that we should leave that money in the highway fund the state police as much as they need to be funded. Very important. They should be fully funded, but out of the general fund.
Right. Your assignment is to keep us posted on these changes as we move forward. All right, coming up, energy assistance for homeowners. There's a bunch of energy programs, and we're going to get into that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by
Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back. I'm joined by Donna M.J. Clark. She's the Vice President and General Counsel with the Energy Association of Pennsylvania. All right, Donna, the COVID-19 has reaped havoc, not just on the health of Americans, but also on their finances. And you folks are involved in programs. I want to provide some assistance and relief. I want to talk, first of all, about energy assistance for renters. Take it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Terry. It's great to be here. Good to see you again. And you're right. Our members, which are distribution utility companies, electric and gas companies, have seen that their customers, a lot of their customers who were struggling to pay their bills before the pandemic, continued to struggle to pay their bills, as well as people that were impacted economically when we had all the shutdowns in 2020. And so there are a number of programs available. And as you mentioned one right off the top, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The dollars from that came from the federal government.
First of all, what's that do?
It provides rental and utility assistance to renters.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense? So it helps people pay their rent and their utility bills.
Okay.
It's a very generous program. The funding came through one of the pieces of federal legislation back in late 2020 and early 2021. The state has gotten over $500 million available for people who are struggling to pay their rent and their utility bills because they've been impacted by COVID-19. And as I mentioned, the programs are generous. They're run by the counties, so you're applying at your county level, and they will pay for missed rental payments starting in March of 2020. I think it continues for about 15 months. They'll pay back utility bills and future utility bills. I think the key here is getting the word out. Right now, those programs have been open since March or April of this year, and what we're finding is people aren't applying. So we want to get the word out.
Yeah.
If you're struggling in that way, you need to call your county assistance office and apply for those programs.
Do you think it could be, we had this situation with evictions, that it ended and then Governor Wolf extended it again. Do you think that's a fundamental reason because they're not going to be evicted?
Well, that could be part of it. I do think that part of it is just communicating and making sure that people know that those funds are available. There was a moratorium on evictions. There was also a moratorium on utility terminations, which is also ended. And I think in both cases, those programs are available. I think the ending of those moratoriums spurs people to apply, but I also think that getting the word out. And as I said, those are county-administered programs.
I was just going to ask you about that. So at least it's not the state or the federal government that actually is implementing it. It's at the county level, translation, more local.
It is more local, and you can also find information on your utility website. So it is more local. You're dealing with people that are should be more reachable, or you might be more comfortable, but it's unusual for counties to run these types of programs.
Oh, sure.
And so again, getting the word out and making sure that people know where to apply. So that's a really key program. And in fact, I believe that program is going to run through 2025.
Wow.
So it's not ending. It's there. It's available. Please apply if you are either behind in your rent or, from our members' perspective, particularly if you're behind in your utility bills.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Homeowners Relief Program. What's that about, and why is it important?
And that is a corollary to the rental program. Now, that program isn't up and running yet. That program, I believe, is going to be run through Pennsylvania Housing Finance Authority, and I think it's going into place this fall. So they're still working out how they're going to implement and administer it. But again, this is going to be help for people who fell behind in mortgage payments because of COVID and utility bills. But so there's
it's renters in the energy assistance, and it's homeowners getting relief. So both sides of the coin, so to speak.
And both of those programs include energy assistance. And I might say, as I mentioned, for the rental assistance, the program will continue through 2025. And I believe that in addition to over $500 million that the state has received to finance that program, there's almost another equal amount in the pipeline coming down the road, making sure that those funds are available.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And one of the interesting features of the $1 trillion plus infrastructure bill is that the money gets spent over 5 years. So similarly, they're adding years because who knows how long. Look, we got the revival of the pandemic and what that's going to do to the economy overall, but to individuals as well.
Right, and the dollars that we're speaking about, these two programs, came before this most recent enactment by Congress. So they came through the American Relief Program that went into place back in January. But in addition to those programs, we still have LIHEAP, which we've talked about before, Low Income Heating Emergency Assistance Program. That program has gotten an influx of dollars.
All right, let's run to a break. I want to talk about utility payments, and then we'll conclude with an overall view of, not just what's going on now, but what could be down the pike, so to speak. All right, we're going to run to a break. We'll see you after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Well, we're chatting about a number of subjects that are very, very important to Pennsylvanians, and guess what? We have to pay our utility bills. Electric, gas, continue. Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, well, thank you, Terry. And yes, as we were talking, COVID certainly impacted customers, made paying bills more difficult for some customers, but utilities have customer assistance programs that have run for years in addition to the programs we talked about before. Another federally funded program, LIHEAP, which is Low Income Heating Emergency Assistance Program.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's a mouthful. It runs every year. It usually starts late fall and goes through the spring. This year, because of COVID, the federal government gave all the states an additional influx of money to spend through the summer, an additional close to $300 million, and that's in addition to the funds that are going to come in the fall. So again, a large program, a lot of help available, and we want to make sure that people apply for the help and are not confused because there are multiple programs. But you could be eligible for more than one program.
How does it get implemented?
LIHEAP gets implemented by the Department of Human Services. So they implement the program. Utilities are vendors. Fuel oil dealers are vendors. Anybody that provides heating assistance or heat.
So they would go to the department on behalf of their customers? Is that a way to put it?
Actually, the customer applies. There's an application, again, usually at the county assistance office. There's information on all utility websites about this program. It is a program that a lot of low-income families are aware of because it is an annual program, runs every year. So again, this program, this time, we've gotten extra funding because of the COVID.
COVID, sure.
So we're running some additional programs in the summer, and again, there'll be programs in the fall and over the winter. It's there, and it's getting people to apply for that program. The help is available to pay your utility bills.
Well, we probably have a minute left, but I have to ask you about weatherization of homes. That's something, again, that we don't think the federal government, that the government would be involved with. Take it.
So weatherization, yes, there are federally funded programs, plus our members do weatherization programs, and just linking it back to COVID. Again, another area that was impacted by the shutdown in the spring, right? If you're weatherizing a home, if you're a contractor coming in to weatherize a home, you certainly weren't doing that in the spring and early summer of 2020. Those are programs which we really encourage our low income and middle income customers to take advantage of because they reduce the bills, then you pay less. So energy efficiency, weatherizing a home, that's something that is available through utilities, through the Department of Community and Economic Development, creates more efficiency, lowers your bills.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. This has been a great update. I'm sure our viewers they're hopefully taking notes. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.